Another clarification that Swedenborg makes is that there is, according to him, marriage in heaven. And that is the opposite of the traditional belief that there is no marriage in heaven. And that comes from Jesus' own words. He says they are neither married nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels. Now, I know a lot of Christians, including Christian ministers, traditional Christians, that have said, I don't understand what he meant by that. I know that I love my wife, and I know, I believe in all my heart that I'll be with her after death. I don't understand why he said that. Well, I think there is a reason why he said it in those strong terms. And let me tell you, by putting it into context, what he really meant. Back in those days, people were very, very materialistic. We can see that. Also, their idea of marriage was very materialistic as well. One of the ways we see this is the Sadducees had come. They didn't even believe in the afterlife. The Sadducees had come to Jesus and asked him a question about marriage and the afterlife, and they didn't even believe in the afterlife. And the ideas that they had about marriage, you'll see, were not very good. They talk about a woman who got married and her husband died. Well, what should happen? They didn't have insurance policies back then. There was a rule. If a woman married someone and he died, his brother would have to marry her. And if he died, his brother or relative would have to marry her. So think about that right there. What's that have to do with love? What does that have to do with companionship or care about other people or even intimacy when simply I have to marry this person and take care of them? So what they did was they told a story. It was a ridiculous story, but they said a woman, I'm going to write this down. In class, I actually get people to get up and act this out with me, but it says a woman was married to a husband, and I'm going to stick figure this, and he died. So then the brother had to marry her, so he came along, and he died. And then another brother had to marry her. He came along, and he died. So on and so forth. They get up to 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 brothers who all married her and died. So right away, ridiculous story. But then they say something that I want it to hurt your ears the way they say it. They say, okay, Jesus. So in the other life, which one has her? Which one has her? I mean, what a terrible thing to say, as if there was an ownership belonging here. And yet in those days, we know all too well that that's how they treated women. They were like property. In polygamy that was rampant in those days, marrying as many women as possible was just a status symbol. Swedenborg says you can't have true love with more than one person. And that's what genuine love, I think Western world knows this so well. The romance, but even deeper than that, the connection between a husband and wife is so deep and beautiful, two people together. And Swedenborg does such a great emphasis on that in a book called Conjugal Love, or some translations are Love and Marriage, or even Married Love. But if you get a chance, read that. It also has a lot to do with the afterlife. Now, he says another thing really destroys marriage, and that is the love of dominion. Love of dominating. And I think one of the things we also see in this story is, who will have her is a certain kind of dominion, domination, like she's just a piece of property. And, I guess I have her this time. What Jesus was basically saying, or you could look at it this way, when they asked this terrible question, Jesus basically looked back at them and said, there is no marriage like that in heaven. I'm not going to give you the time of day. What was he supposed to do? Say to them, well, actually, let me explain to you marriage between two people is the greatest jewel of human life and the innocence that belongs. They would have laughed at him. They weren't ready for that. In fact, Jesus says to his disciples, I have many things to say unto you, but you cannot bear them now. And he says later on, these things will be revealed. I think this is one of those things. He said, they don't do that. I'm not even going to give you the time of day. They're as the angels, and we're going to find out what the angels are like later on. Now, Swedenborg does talk about everything in the Bible has a deeper significance and spiritual meaning, and even that story, the marriage, it could be a marriage of evil and falsity that don't exist in heaven, or other types of marriages inside that don't work in heaven. But at the same time, you can see even very literally here that something's just wrong, and that what Jesus was pointing out was they don't do there. So what do they do? So in heaven, Swedenborg talks about in heaven, in God, there is the marriage of good and truth, or love and wisdom, and that these flow down and are represented in a husband and wife. He has a very traditional way of looking at marriage. But when we see a husband and wife coming together and loving each other and working together, it's a perfect marriage, or a symbol of perfect marriage of the love and wisdom that is in the Lord. And that, in a sense, if you think about it, is what makes heaven, is that marriage of love and wisdom, is the ability to bring what you care about into life in a way of understanding and wisdom. So that's what that is about. That's what marriage is. It's a very beautiful thing. He says it's the greatest gift of God to mankind, and with all the delights and joys that God has to give when two people come together and love each other, and express that love, and serve each other, and serve others working together. Now, that brings me to the last point about serving others. People can ask very often, if people are married in heaven, do they have kids? And it's interesting because we already talked about everybody in heaven and hell are from the human race. But Swedenborg does talk about the idea that they have spiritual children, so to speak, people who love each other and work together in a common cause. What children for them is the fruit of their endeavors, the good things that they do for other people, that take on a life of their own, whether it's working with children or with people with less knowledge than others and teaching them and leading them and looking and just seeing and loving what the good things that you produced from working together. That's their children. And we can even see that in this world with people who work closely together, couples. They'll talk about, the beautiful things that they were so lucky to do together, and to rejoice that these things are continuing on their own. They're the fruits of their labors, their offspring. So marriage is a very important thing in Swedenborg's teachings. And, it all stems from the marriage of good and truth in the Lord. And it is not that terrible picture that we see was presented to the Lord in the New Testament, but rather a beautiful picture of love and commitment and joy. Yeah.
I have a curiosity.
Yes.
So, kids that die and go to heaven, could they be raised by a husband and wife who just really love being parents? Like, that's one of their main loves, is parenting, like raising kids.
Well, thank you very much. In fact, I touched on it, but really didn't say it when I said the fruit of their labors may be with children. And yes, children need to be raised in heaven. Now, they grow to become adults. But just like any other children, they're not orphans. They're not left there on their own. In fact, Swedenborg talks about one of the uses, and we're going to get to, people being useful in the other world. One of the uses that angels perform, some of them, is taking care of children who have come into the other life, and they're raised there by these parents who love children with all their hearts. And again, these parents working together, just imagine the joy of seeing those children grow up. There's offspring on all kinds of levels. They're raising children up to become adults, but also think of all the beauty and the joy that they're creating in doing that. And so it's a great thing. Are there any other questions? Okay.